Welcome to the Money Mile Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Waller, and I am happy you are here. We like to think of Money Mile as standing at the corner of triathlon and personal finance. We believe that age group triathletes are the lifeblood of our sport, and we like shining the light on some good people doing great things in our sport. This summer, we're taking the opportunity to highlight some of our favorite questions on course segments from the last several months. In this episode, we're going to bring back two of our favorite questions on course. We're going to focus on the pre-retirement planning side of things, specifically talking about employer-sponsored retirement plan loans and Social Security. So let's get rolling. Please keep in mind that these are for educational purposes only and not financial advice about your individual situation. I received a question a while back and I wanted to dedicate some time to it today. A good friend of mine asked me while we were out on a ride, what do you think of 403B loans? At the time, I will admit I was a bit winded and I did not give perhaps the most robust answer, so I'm going to give it another go here. Please keep in mind that this is general education and is not intended to be specific financial advice about your situation. Ultimately, we are all accumulating resources for our own goals. Your goals are different than my goals, and so everyone should consider the strategies available based on what they are trying to accomplish. The majority of the work I do is to help people become financially independent, so that is my lens. I work with a lot of people who are late career and getting closer to retirement, so that is generally the perspective I have. I will also share a couple of alternate views where this might make more sense. Generally speaking, you need to understand how a 403B or 401k loan works. Different plans handle things differently, so please consult your plan administrator for details. Generally, you can borrow up to 50% or $50,000 of your account balance, whichever is less. So if you have $500,000 in your account and 50% of that is $250,000, the $50,000 limit is the borrowing limit that you would face. If you have $50,000 in your account, 50% of that is $25,000, so $25,000 would be the lending limit or the borrowing limit. This is not a taxable event if you follow the rules, but you do have to pay the loan back. Most often, these loans are paid back through payroll deductions every month or every 2 weeks, and some administrators will work with you if you want to pay extra or want to pay early, but some will not. Most will let you pay the loan off early if you can pay it in full, but that is not a requirement. The money you use to pay back the loan does not count towards your annual contributions as well, so that's something you want to keep in mind. And it is likely that borrowing money from your employer-sponsored retirement plan will be at a lower interest cost than a personal loan or a credit card. So there might be an opportunity there if you are ready for it, but you are still paying interest on the loan. A couple of the primary components here are that you are essentially borrowing money from your own account. So let's say you have $500,000 in your account and it's invested in the S&P 500 fund in your employer plan. You shouldn't only invest in one option, but that's a different episode. So if you borrowed the $50,000 from your plan, $50,000 will be taken out of your S&P 500 fund. As you pay yourself back, you can reallocate it towards the investments you want. If the loan interest was 5% over a year, if we kept everything the same, you would pay yourself back an interest of $2,500. If your S&P 500 fund goes up by 10%, that part of your plan would have gone up by $5,000 instead of the $2,500. But to be fair, if your S&P 500 fund goes down by 10%, your plan account would also go down by $5,000. So there are pros and cons to borrowing money out of those plans, and we don't recommend market timing here. So that's just a facet of the 403B loan or 401k loan that you need to be aware of. Now, let's shift our focus to the bigger question. Why are we considering these loans? Often, this bigger picture is the one that's missed, and this is the one that I missed on that fun day of riding with my buddy. So why are you considering the loan, and what are your other options? If you are looking to buy a new super bike, something that goes down in value, this is a bad financial idea all around. If you're going to buy something that goes down in value, I recommend saving for it in advance and only buying what you can afford. This goes for cars, boats, bikes, vacations, all that stuff. If you are trying to do something to help you accumulate money, we can have a bit of a different conversation. As an example, if you are saving money for a down payment for a home and the 401k loan is the only way you are going to have enough for the down payment, this might be a viable strategy, but you should listen to the end of the episode just to make sure. If you are trying to dig yourself out of a bad spot or protect your family or yourself, sometimes we have to do what we have to do and we sort it out later. For example, if you have found yourself under a mountain of credit card debt and they are charging you 25%, paying 5% to your retirement plan might sound appealing. If you have not changed your spending habits or whatever got you in debt in the first place, you could be creating more problems for yourself. Many folks have tried this and found themselves 2 years later with another mountain of credit card debt and a loan from their retirement plan. Most plans only allow for one loan at a time, so you could really be stuck then. You need to fix the spending problem first, but that's another episode. Additionally, if you have an outstanding loan on your retirement plan, you run the risk of it becoming taxed and penalized if you don't pay it back. For example, if you find yourself with a better job opportunity and need to change employers, you will typically have a short period of time to pay back that loan, typically 60 to 90 days, or the loan becomes a distribution and is subject to taxes and potential penalties. Most of the time, when people ask me about 403b loans or 401k loans, my general response is the same. I'm not a huge fan. There are situations where they work, but they have their own inherent risks and they need to be considered. They are not get-out-of-jail-free cards, and the long-term risks can be significant. A question that I have received frequently is, should I consider Social Security in my planning? For those of you that are not aware, Social Security is a system for U.S. residents and wage earners in the U.S. that operates somewhat behind the scenes. We pay into it throughout our working career. As an employee, we pay part, as our employers will pay part of that. But it is a system that essentially operates behind the scenes, and then at some future date, the Social Security Administration says they are going to pay you a certain amount. If you are curious, you can go to ssa.gov. To the website is ssa.gov. You can check your earnings history there, make sure everything's accurate, and get an idea of what your estimates are. To be clear, when I think about Social Security, I think of two things. Essentially, the Social Security system is designed to give you a monthly income stream for the rest of your life, which operates very similar to an insurance annuity payout system that you would receive for the rest of your life, or an old school pension, if you might be familiar with those sorts of things. The other piece of this is that we are also dealing with a government system. As we all know, some government systems are fantastic and some leave some room for improvement. Essentially, what we are talking about here with Social Security, in my view, is a government-run insurance program. Typically, two individual things I'm not a huge fan of, and you put them together, I am also not a huge fan of that. In general, I would recommend that you keep in mind there are likely going to be some changes with this system in the near or long term. So it's not an ironclad guarantee that it's always going to be exactly what it says, and there are likely going to be some changes. So one of the reasons why I think there are going to be changes is highlighted by your Social Security statement. So if you log into ssa.gov and pull up your Social Security statement, one of the things that you'll see there, and they've kind of pushed it down on this statement. I looked at my statement here, and if I look at page 4, there is a section on there that says Social Security will be there when you retire. Now, on my form, it says, and I'll quote here, the Social Security Board of Trustees estimates that based on current law, the trust funds will be able to pay benefits in full and on time until 2034. In 2034, Social Security would still be able to pay about $800 for every $1,000 of benefits scheduled. End quote. That essentially tells me that on the current path, and I'm recording this in October of 2024, on the current path, the Social Security Administration should be able to have enough money to pay all their bills for the next decade. After that, they'll be able to pay about 80 cents on the dollar for future claims. I would anticipate fully that something is going to change here. I don't think the politicians will let Social Security fail, but that being said, I think we should be aware of some potential changes, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So a good rule of thumb, in my opinion, to start with is that if you are under age 55 in 2024, I wouldn't overly rely on Social Security in its current form. At some point, if you're further down the road, maybe you're already receiving Social Security, I think you're probably pretty safe. But again, I would anticipate that there are going to be some changes down the road. There are a few things you need to be aware of with Social Security. There are several different benefits as a starting point. The first of which is your primary retirement benefit. There is lots of talk out there about delaying Social Security and trying to take it as late as you can, which is generally a fine idea. And the reason being is that the longer you wait, there's a guaranteed increase in your Social Security payment. That is all well and good. I like guaranteed income streams of higher amounts as much as the next guy. The big question here is longevity. So as I often comment, I had a client years ago who had said he was, as a male in his family, no male had ever reached the age of 70, and he was not planning on being the first. So if you find yourself in that situation, taking your Social Security early might not be a bad deal. However, with the marvels of modern medicine and extended life expectancy, I would anticipate that most of us are going to be living a little bit longer in this generation than the generation prior. So when we're thinking about receiving those benefits for longer periods of time, that's where the longevity question comes in, and when is it better for you? Unfortunately, going into that decision-making process, if you're in your late 50s or early 60s trying to figure it out, there is a right time to claim Social Security. Unfortunately, you won't know what that is until a decade or so after you've claimed it. If you have this conversation or if you're reviewing your benefits around your 84th birthday, chances are you'll have a pretty good idea of when you should have started claiming benefits. It's just hard to know going into it. So there's some unknowns there. I have some general guidelines when we're talking about your primary retirement benefit. And ultimately, a lot of it comes down to the point that the money has got to come from somewhere. So if you are dead set going to stop working at 65, the money has to come from somewhere for you to keep food on your table, to keep the light bills paid, and for you to travel or do whatever you want to do. So if you have a bunch of money elsewhere that you can utilize and you have the capacity to delay your Social Security payments, then great. Typically, Social Security eligibility starts at age 62, and the longest that you can defer it is age 70. So that kind of gives you the range in which you're dealing with. But again, that money has got to come from somewhere. My suggestions here are to consider delaying it until you're going to use it as the first piece. So if you are actively working, don't claim your Social Security until you're actually going to use that Social Security income. There's some messy stuff that goes on with that. If you're taking your Social Security before your full retirement age, they'll still let you do it, but it gets messy. So if you're not going to use it, don't claim it. The second piece that I want you to be aware of involves some of the other benefits which we're going to talk about. The spousal benefit is an important component of Social Security planning for married couples. Spousal benefits are something that show up on the fourth page of your Social Security statement as in a relatively small blurb. But I'll paint the example that if you have a husband and wife, and let's say the wife is the primary breadwinner for the home, and the husband has been a stay-at-home husband his entire adulthood, and therefore has not earned his own credits. As a spouse, he is eligible to receive a spousal benefit related to his wife's Social Security earnings history. Now, I know this can get a little bit confusing, a little convoluted. So essentially the way that it works is when the claiming spouse has reached their full retirement age, the spouse is then eligible for 1/2 of the full retirement benefit of the primary wage earning spouse. Now, if the primary wage earner isn't claiming Social Security, it doesn't really have an impact there. You have to wait until the primary breadwinner or the primary wage earner has started claiming. There is a benefit of 1/2 of the primary wage earner's benefit at full retirement age. That is for the spouse. So in theory, one spouse could get $3,000, or the primary wage earning spouse could have a benefit of $3,000, and then the spousal benefit would be $1,500. So in total, between the two of them, they would get $4,500. So the spousal benefit is an important piece to consider when you're looking at claiming strategies. It is all still based on the full retirement age benefit, and there are some different nuances there of taking funds early and when things can happen. So I highly recommend you do a deep dive or sit down with your Social Security representative to get some additional information there. The next piece in the decision-making process for me is the survivorship benefit. The survivorship benefit is when one of those two spouses passes away, the surviving spouse has the capacity, and as I understand it, it's actually the choice, to opt for either of the Social Security benefits. If the primary breadwinning spouse or primary earning spouse had earned $3,000 a month and the spousal benefit was $1,500, the surviving spouse can then choose which of those two benefits they would like to take. Now, I have not heard of anyone effectively selecting the lower amount, because I don't know that somebody would do that if they knew what they were doing. But typically, it means that you don't get both, that you could just choose the larger of those two benefits. So delaying benefits specifically for the survivorship benefit and trying to grow that survivorship benefit for the surviving spouse is also something to consider. So lots of nuanced pieces there, but hopefully I explained all that clearly. And again, this is really around the primary wage earner and their claiming strategies. There are lots of other things that go on with Social Security, and we're really just touching at the high-level pieces to hopefully whet your appetite and get you interested in exploring some options. And again, I would highly recommend you talk with your Social Security representative. There are a couple of other things that you do need to be aware of, one of which is that Social Security benefits can be taxed, and I would say that for most of my clients, Social Security benefits are taxed at some level. If your income reaches, or if your income is below a certain threshold, then your Social Security is paid to you income tax free. That level is relatively low. So for most of my clients that have meaningful resources elsewhere and have done a good job of saving and accumulating, they are going to be paying taxes on their Social Security at some level. The question is, how much of their Social Security is going to be included in their taxable income? That amount starts at 50% of your Social Security, and as it goes up, it's capped at 85% of your Social Security is included in your taxable income. At least, again, based on current guidelines, that is the rule around Social Security. I mentioned before that there are likely going to be changes within the Social Security system. A couple of those changes that I would like for you to be aware of as potentials, and again, nothing is written in stone at this point. There are two primary changes that I believe are things that you should be considering. The first of which is an increase in wage-based limits and maximum contributions into the system. What this means is that if you are a wage earner or you earn money in the U.S. system, it means that the first $168,600 in 2024 is included in the Social Security calculation. So if you earn an extra $100,000 over and above that, you're not going to pay Social Security tax on that amount above the $168,000 number. This is one of the likely areas that I would anticipate there to be some change down the road, that it does adjust with inflation periodically, but I would anticipate that one of the common ways that gets discussed to fix Social Security is to either increase that cap significantly or remove it entirely. And essentially that means that anyone who's making more than $170,000 is going to be contributing more into that Social Security system. The other change that is perhaps a little bit more concerning for the folks that I talk with is the impact of some degree of means testing. And what that means, for lack of a better term, is that if you have done well and accumulated resources on your own, that your Social Security is going to be offset to some extent. Now, we don't know that any of these changes are going to be made or when they're going to be made. We just know that the system right now is set up to not be able to pay all its bills in another decade. So if the means testing comes to pass, that simply means that if you have accumulated your own resources and have your own retirement savings, that you shouldn't rely on Social Security, because they could essentially decrease or offset the amount of Social Security that you receive. Now, Social Security is already a very complex and convoluted system. I'm not exactly sure how they would do something like that, but they have proven that they can do it. There are other offset provisions already baked into Social Security, depending upon your benefit structure. Some of them might apply to you and some of them don't. In particular, they have to do with governmental pension offsets and looking at the windfall elimination period or the names of the two programs. And depending upon your overall financial situation, those things may or may not apply. But the system has proven that they can bake those things in. So moving forward, my general recommendation is that if you are looking at your financial situation and you know that you need to replace $10,000 a month of lifestyle expense, and that's what you want to be able to work towards, I would suggest that you work towards replacing $10,000 a month. If Social Security kicks in and there are resources available there for you, then wonderful. That can be a little bit of extra travel money or a little bit of extra fun, but I wouldn't want you to be reliant upon a government-run insurance program to provide for the food, clothing, and shelter for you and your loved ones. That's my 2 cents. I do still run the calculations for Social Security for many of my clients and help them understand what that looks like. If it shows up, many clients will just say, well, hey, what does it look like if we just include half of the Social Security income, which is fine. And we can certainly do all the projections and calculations on that sort of thing. I don't want you to be in a situation where you are relying on that government-run insurance program if we can avoid it. Now, we have covered a lot about Social Security, and we have only really scratched the surface. There is a lot more information out there, and if Social Security is an important and meaningful part of your plan for financial independence, I highly recommend that you seek additional guidance and additional support from either your friendly local financial planner or reach out to your local Social Security Administration office and sit down with one of the representatives there and chat with them. Lots of information in there. I hope this episode of Money Mile was valuable for you. If it was, please share the podcast with your training buddies and friends. Keep in mind that if you work out, everything else will too. And we'll look forward to talking with you next time on Money Mile.